people are coming in with these relatively siloed offerings that are pretty narrow point solutions. And so what if I want to do some offshoot on that? And what people say is, well, you can try to use it for that, but then it doesn't work very well. And I think that's what people have experienced with a lot of these point solutions in the market. And so what they really need is an extensible toolkit, not just a single point solution.
Today on LawNext, the acquisition by global law company Elevate Services of the AI technology and consulting firm LexPredict. I'll be joined today by Pratik Patel, co-founder and vice president of innovation at Elevate, and Dan Katz, co-founder and chief strategy officer of LexPredict, not to mention professor of law at Chicago-Kent College of Law and director of Chicago-Kent's Law Lab, a research center focused on legal innovation and technology. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that highlights the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. Before I get to Pratik and Dan, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. Pratik and Dan, welcome to LawNext. Great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Likewise, thank you.
And I guess just for the sake of our listeners, I should say, Pratik, say hello. Get the voices down.
Sounds good. Hi, this is Pratik.
And Dan?
Hi, this is Dan Katz.
So in preparing for today's show, I was realizing that we're all members of what I think of as a secret society called the College of Law Practice Management. And I noticed that both of you were inducted into the college in the same year, which was just a little over a year ago in late 2017. So I had to wonder, were the seeds of this acquisition sowed over rubber chicken at the induction ceremony?
Well, maybe partly. I mean, both of our wives actually finally met each other for the first time, and maybe if that had anything to do with it. But I think, I don't know if you agree, Dan, but one of the things that we noticed as part of that induction class into the college was that there was a lot more focus on technology innovators in the space. And it's just something that Dan and I had kind of looked at and observed as part of that induction class.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We've been working together in one form or another for quite a while now. And so, when we were at the Skull and Bone Society there, I think, it's hard to, I don't know if that moved it along or it didn't, but I do think, that organization, the College of Law Practice Management, I mean, it certainly does reflect the kind of some of the players in the ecosystem. And I think Pratik's right. I mean, the composition of that group has been changing, and I think to reflect sort of some of the changes in the market or what's coming next for law, i.e. the name of the podcast here. So,
right, exactly. Well, I want to talk a lot about some of the specifics of this acquisition, but Dan, I wanted to start with you. I mean, you're both a practitioner of innovation through LexPredict and a scholar to some extent of innovation in law. So what do you see as the significance, if any, about Elevate's acquisition of LexPredict?
Well, I think it's probably a harbinger of other things like it to come. I think the market, in our experience, the market is looking for solutions, and those solutions could be pure products, but are often these product service bundles. And so the market's gone really kind of hot with building lots and lots of products, but I think the future is going to be blending those with services. And so, we were largely a product-oriented company. There are many others in the space, but I think, we sort of looked out and said we're going to need to append ourselves somehow to a place with a much larger service arm, particularly subject matter experts, and a place like Elevate has got a very large number of them available. So I think we're going to see more of that. So we're going to see more of these pure product companies having to move in the service direction because that's because the customer is going to wants a solution, which is often a blend of the two things. That's at least one of the kind of, meta principles I think that underlied us this deal.
Pratik, how about you? What do you see as kind of the big picture significance of this acquisition before we get into more of the details about it?
Yeah, no, I think this is, I think for both sides, this, to Dan's point, this is this means a lot of things. And I think, it just underpins the importance of kind of what we like to call here machines and expertise in everything. And what we mean by that is, especially in this space, even if we can build automation and machines to do things at the base of what lawyers are doing, we really believe that it's going to require a combination of technology, expertise to provide the solutions in this market that I think can be picked up and used. So we saw this acquisition as just kind of a step towards evolving that overall premise. And then for us, I mean, for Elevate, and in talking to the LexPredict team, it was just a very strong alignment in terms of the way we looked at the world, right? We saw, that we needed to kind of power services, both in terms of automation, but as we provide services to this market, it's not just the base automation that helps in these services, but it's also the ability to train machines to actually do some of the QC around some of the services that typically humans would run. And then secondly, to be able to actually power products with machine learning and intelligence and the like. So we saw this for our business as a law company, the ability to create large efficiencies in the services that we provide, as well as what we believe to be kind of the critical elements of software and products that will hit the market probably as soon as 1 to 3 years from now, some of it already happening as we see today, and some of the other providers that are delivering some of this stuff.
Now, you just referred to yourself as a law company. I once made maybe the mistake of describing Elevate in a blog post as a legal process outsourcing company.
Okay, yeah.
And I got an email from Liam Brown, your co-founder and executive chairman, who said, quote, Elevate has an allergic reaction to being called an LPO. So for the benefit of listeners who maybe aren't all that familiar with Elevate, what do you do? What are you?
No, we always love answering that question, because I think it is something that is, if you look at the makeup of Elevate, you look at a combination of strategy, services, and technology for law. Okay. And that combination hasn't really presented itself in this market, at least all in one, integrated into a fashion. And we can't say that we've fully put all the pieces together. I think the acquisition of LexPredict is just another example of putting those pieces together. But in our world and in our view, the definition of a law company is a company or a platform that law departments and law firms can come to actually kind of engage and embed all three of those pieces in a single solution form, or can pick each of those pieces off as kind of an a la carte type of method that they prefer. But the law company at the base definitely has an underpinning of technology. It is a services business as well as a software business, but it has kind of technology at the heart of its DNA. And so initially, the law company for us, was fueled by products that could or could not provide automation, and now it actually could provide that as well. But I think that definition will evolve. I think it'll become a bit more maybe prevalent and or common term. But I think it's also hard for people, because the evolution of this market has been that you haven't really had a platform like that. So while Liam may say he has an allergic reaction, I think we all agree. I mean, it's kind of the reaction we have. But we're also understanding of the fact that we're also trying to pioneer the definition of it as well. So in that journey, you're going to have people who are trying to define it, and then we'll try our best to try and make sure we can kind of move from definition to reality for this market.
If we did not have the ABA model rules, would we be calling you a law firm?
That's a great question. So I think the answer is no, and the reason is because could we provide legal services? Would our law companies going to provide legal services in the future? The answer is probably yes, right? It's already happening in the UK.
Well,
it's already happening around the world, right? And so, I think even though that is going to be embedded in that services vertical, I think you're still going to hear us and refer to us as the law company. And the reason for that is that, again, it goes back to the combination of those things, those underpinnings of project management into the delivery of the services, the underpinning of technology into the delivery of services, the underpinning of what I'd call, what's been kind of commonly referred to as these T-shaped professionals that fall across all lines of business. That to us is really more, it's different than a law firm. It's actually a lot more kind of business centric for the practice of law versus maybe the delivery of legal services as being the core function. So, the terms may come close, but I think it's actually something different.
So Dan, we've talked about what Elevate is. Explain to us what LexPredict does.
Well, we've done a variety of different sorts of things, but I'd say the core set of activities was bringing data science / machine learning to market in a variety of different manners. Probably the most distinctive thing we did is create a set of open source. We open sourced a large amount of our offerings to try to kind of actually look like the rest of the technical world, which has moved very heavily in that direction over the last, say, 10 years. So we have Contract Suite, which is at its base we have this library called LexNLP, and actually I think what we'd like that to be is something akin to if you saw what Amazon did in releasing its kind of I think MedComprehend, I think is the name of it, but basically it's a natural language processing engine that is tuned to medical documents and records. We've built a thing called LexNLP, which at its base is something that is a platform that can process various forms of legal documents, taking a very broad view of what a legal document is. Off that, think of that as running kind of horizontally. Then we have these offshoots, like contracts are a specific document type. And so we have Contract Suite as a shoot off of that. We have some stuff in a variety of other verticals that we have some litigation-centric offerings. We have some what might be called RegTech type offerings. But yeah, we're just bringing natural language processing and AI to market in a variety of use cases, I guess is what you could say the business does. The other half is helping organizations, both law firms and corporate legal departments, on their data journey. So they're sitting on, in principle, lots of data, but it's unstructured and it's hard for them to actually generate actionable insights from. And so we help them in that process.
So what is the acquisition by Elevate? How does the acquisition by Elevate change what you've been doing with LexPredict or what LexPredict does?
I think we're going to continue to do a lot of the same things we had been doing. I think as I said at the outset, some of the solutions we needed to craft involved having access to a large number of subject matter experts. And so, in a sense, on some of the stuff we were doing together already, we were doing that. And so I guess we were dating for a while, and then we decided to get married. But I mean, in a lot of those projects, it was, we need to blend these two things together: the kind of subject matter expertise together with AI or machine learning extenders upon that expertise. We've done quite a bit of work in the contract and RegTech space type. That's been kind of the places we've worked on together, but there's a range of other application areas. So for our team, we're going to get integrated with Elevate, and we're going to continue doing some of the stuff we were doing. And then I think there'll be some new market opportunities or new offerings that we can bring to bear when we're a fully integrated enterprise instead of what we've been, which is two separate entities kind of working jointly at times.
Does Contract Suite remain open source?
Well, Liam Brown has committed himself publicly to that fact on now a couple of occasions. Yes, so I mean, yes, and that had been discussed, and I think it continues to be the plan. And I know there has been expressed concern. Some of the customers expressed concern, and we've said yes. Yes, it would. I mean, I think it's a distinctive strategy and a distinctive offering in this market where, frankly, what people are really doing in a lot of these products is taking open source stuff, closed sourcing it, putting a front end on top of it and then selling it to the market. But if they read their licenses, they would see all these disclaimers that these products actually use a lot of open source to begin with. And so I think what we try to do is be a little bit more upfront with people about what is actually going on and try to demystify some of the stuff in the sense that, like, hey, you can go look at it for yourself. It's sitting on GitHub. And certainly there's risk in doing that we thought the transparency associated with that would offset. At least I'm saying this as the LexPredict position historically has been this, but I think Elevate shares that view, which is that customers just want their problem solved, and the fact that you can show them that you really have the stuff is actually quite a bit better than saying I have some magic secret proprietary algorithm, when we all know it's really not. There's not that much secret sauce here. It's just doing it that's the sauce.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'll add to that because I think the answer is yes. And Dan, you said it well. I mean, Liam, and as a business, we just truly believe in the ability, and it's two factors. One, we truly believe in the ability for law departments and law firms to have this capability is integral, right? Second, we also feel like over time, we shouldn't, and the industry shouldn't feel like they have to pay at the baseline for basic automation activities that can augment lawyers. So, for example, is it really truly differentiating that a machine can extract different pieces of information out of a contract? We think that that's kind of baseline utility, right? Now, what's I think differentiating for each of the law firms that choose to use that type of functionality and or a law department is their expertise that goes into those machines that potentially use kind of the open source. And so that's really the piece that we feel is going to allow differentiation among the providers who choose to pick up this open source technology and use it. Having said that, one of the things that we've all collectively noticed, this is the Elevate and LexPredict teams together, is the legal market today, even if we were to provide open source, doesn't really know how to fully leverage that unless they had a team of very talented engineers, frankly, within their law firm or law department. And so part of our joint mission is to say, well, okay, how do we continue to raise the quality of the open source such that you don't necessarily always need a team of engineers to be able to leverage it. At the same time, package and solution what we'd call, more sophisticated products such that the market can be able to digest and use these things. And so trying to find the right balance of what can be provided open source that's useful, what can be packaged and solutioned to enable greater adoption, I think is something we're now, frankly, in the same room trying to figure out. But at the baseline, I think, this is kind of when Dan was mentioning this idea of, we'd kind of been dating for a while. A lot of that had been on the premise that we all believed that this market was kind of hungry for, I can't say real commoditization may be a strong word, but frankly, that's what we kind of believe. Some of those basic things should just be commodities that you should just be able to get very easily and frankly open without trying to figure out how much money you're going to pay for it. Some of these things we just feel are kind of integral to the basic practice of law. So,
well, Pratik and Dan, stay with me for just a second. I'm going to take a moment to hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back to the show. And welcome back to LawNext. We're talking to Pratik Patel, co-founder and vice president of innovation at Elevate, and Dan Katz, co-founder and chief strategy officer at LexPredict, about Elevate's recent acquisition of LexPredict. And as you've both alluded to, you guys were, as Dan said, kind of dating for a while. You talked in announcing this acquisition that you'd been working together on due diligence and contract analysis for Cisco in particular. Can you talk a little bit more about what you've been doing for Cisco and where you go from there in developing what you've already begun to build together?
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit, and then Dan, I'd love for you to fill in here. Cisco is a customer of Elevate's on a few things. Primarily, we provide Cisco their kind of an ongoing deal room capability for a lot of their high volume M&A transactions. And separately, we tend to be just a natural partner of innovation to Cisco as they think through new ideas. one of the things that specifically Steve Harmon, Mike Naughton, Mark Gorman, and others at Cisco had come to us on was the idea that, we could, instead of using very targeted and prescripted machines to do very specific things on diligence, what they really wanted was, and wanted to investigate was, is there a malleable tool set that could be trained to create massive efficiencies in the ability to understand contracts, whether it be for an M&A transaction where there's a very rapid need to understand what's in the diligence or the deal room, or on a larger subset of contracts where not just understanding and trying to extract information, but also going a bit further and saying, well, we really need to understand, kind of like discovery, how many of these contracts or which of these contracts are relative to a certain business topic and or risk that we're concerned about. So it first started with that goal. And then it became, well, what tool set can we pick up that allows us to do that? And so we, Elevate, kind of discovered, just looked around the market, and we landed on LexPredict and the contract suite tool for the specific reason that we found that tool set to be both, they built kind of on top of LexNLP, the contract suite solution. So it was already targeted to using natural language processing for the analysis of information in specific contract documents. But then second, it was actually flexible enough where we could actually say, well, here's our use case, and this is what we're going to train the machine to do. And so that was really the basis of it. The science experiment, as we call it, is called Wingman. We've just kind of termed it that way because we wanted to provide lawyers in Cisco's law department a kind of a wingman tool, wingman or wingwoman, just the idea that it could be something that flew with the lawyers as they tried to do the things that they were doing. Now, we are in very early stages of the science experiment. We're trying to understand not only if the output can be what it needs to be, but also understanding the process. And if you ask Mike Naughton, who's in their innovation group, they're like, what's most important about this process? He'll say, it's not just about proving that it's accurate. It's about proving that we understand the process such that we can replicate it. And so that includes, how do you build what we call a training model set? How do you actually train the machine? At what point do you tune the machine? What are you looking for opportunities to tune the machine? And this is where, Dan, I don't know if you can add a little bit, but that's really the purpose of it. And at the end of it, if we can prove that, A, we've been able to follow that process, B, it's cost effective, C, it's provided, significant efficiencies, then that's really what the market can begin to use as a template. And that's, it's not just for Cisco. I think the folks there also want to be able to contribute back and say, here's how you take a machine and use it to your advantage.
Dan, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, this is very much kind of along our, along the thinking that we have had all along, which is, if let's say you're a corporate legal department, like a Cisco, you're being bombarded by people trying to sell you single point solutions to specific problems, whether it's contracts or otherwise. That's just kind of how the product market, especially the AI products in legal, are kind of growing up. There's, people are coming in with these relatively siloed kind of offerings that are pretty narrow point solutions. And, say, well, what if I want to do some offshoot on that? And what people say is, well, you can try to use it for that, but then it doesn't work very well. And I think that's what people have experienced with a lot of these point solutions in the market. And so what they really need is an extensible toolkit, not just a single point solution. I mean, there are a few places where it makes sense to have a point solution, but I think most of it, that's kind of where that's the arc a bunch of these organizations have been on. And so what they want to be doing is, as they do work on one problem, they're actually they're actually knocking other dominoes down on other problems, rather than saying, we have this, we solved this kind of deli slice of a problem, but we have 20 others, 50 others. So kind of this idea of having extensible toolkits is, you're actually making progress as an organization to embed AI across, or analytics, or kind of all three, analytics and automation / AI across your entire, all these functions that, say, a corporate legal department has. It's a much more holistic approach than what we see today, which is people come in and try to sell you a discrete, unextensible product. And again, I think people are kind of are going to begin to move past that. Some have already moved past that. I don't know if I'm doing justice to it, Pratik, but that's roughly kind of my take on it, on the whole thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, you're talking about essentially developing a product that can be adapted to different use cases, different workflows. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been asked over just in the period to do all of these kind of they're all, let's just take in the contracts realm. There's a whole slew of different contract problems, and they're different enough that, like, analyze oil and gas leases in Central Asia. Look at the ISDA master agreement and offshoots thereof. Look at this commercial lease portfolio. You got this kind of federated set of contract types, and while they're all contracts, and they don't share a tremendous amount of overlap. And so training a machine on one doesn't really help you all that on the next one, unless you're kind of working holistically from a data model perspective. And I don't want to get too technical, but that's really where the rubber meets the road in all of this stuff. And so you need somebody with some thoughtfulness and an extensible toolkit to actually take advantage of the fact, if you work on one problem, that you can slide across them. So if you're Cisco or somebody like them, you want to be able to move from problem to problem to problem across the organization and actually gain momentum, not have every one of them be a one-off.
Yeah, I think the other big thing is that when you have a business challenge, let's say your business challenge is, I need to sift through a large set of contracts and identify, which of those, like in a demerger situation, in one case, which of those need to be reassigned, which of those need renegotiation. I mean, there could be a number of things. You have GDPR, where it's just a different use case. You have LIBOR reporting that's coming up that's going to require, people to identify, find, and then take action on certain agreements. When you have those kind of situations, you need a process of how you're going to tackle it. You need we think always technology to supplement just human effort in a high volume intensity type of situation. And then you need the ability to kind of put it all together, kind of solutioning, design, training of the machine, all these things. Now, if you think about how to solve that challenge, the way we looked at it together was, Elevate and LexPredict always trying to, in the background, on behalf of a customer, put that all together. But I think what most customers are looking for is, well, I want to be able to present a business challenge, have a single process for how to tackle it, have the service of setting up a technology and using it more of a managed service. And then at some point, if we continue to see how that's done, we can make the decision about whether we want to self-serve ourselves on that technology or not. But until that process can be delivered, replicated, and frankly kind of become comfortable with, right now we just believe that is better served in a packaged solution, if that makes sense. And so, the ability for us to use these technologies in a nimble fashion and say, okay, for one use case, I'm going to set up the technology like this, but in another, I'm going to set it up like that. That's huge, especially when some of the business challenges are a bit different. How to train a machine to look for this type of language in an agreement versus that type is the difference between efficiency on that engagement versus the other. So, for us, it was the ability to say, okay, what can do that for us without having to recreate this thing every time? You create a baseline of basic extraction capabilities. You create a baseline of contract entities that you'd want to be able to analyze. But then every project that you get, you have to have a very rapid and nimble ability to say, okay, for this project, we're just going to tune it this way, and boom, now you have something that can do that particular thing for that project. Looking for reassignment clauses versus privacy clauses. I mean, that's the type of stuff that we want to be able to do very fast.
Where else do you take this AI technology in ways that serve your client base? I mean, I know that in announcing the acquisition, you talked about developing billing and pricing tools using this technology. What do you see happening there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, because we just had a session. Dan and I, Mike, Eric, the kind of the leadership team at LexPredict, we laid out last week what Elevate was interested in, what LexPredict was interested in, and it mostly overlaps. And there's a lot of use cases. And I think what we landed was, obviously, contracts is a big space that we're kind of targeting, right? There's a lot of current need in that space. RegTech monitoring is another big space for us that we feel could add significant efficiencies, both on data collection as well as monitoring, on both, kind of regulatory policy as well as compliance related to that policy. We think that, the ability for us to use LexNLP and package up things for matter analytics and what we talk about, which is outside counsel, billing compliance, pricing, planning, structuring of matter plans, is something that Elevate's been very involved in through our legal project management solution line, but now we just want to add a little bit more kind of intelligence too. Dan, you mentioned medical records. There's a lot of customers that we have that are really just yearning for some automation as it comes to the analysis and chronology of medical records. And so there's a lot of different use cases. I think the press release mentions a lot of the ones that we're most interested in. And I think if we get some of these basic things down, just in terms of the ability to create efficiencies, Dan, I know you have a nice depiction of kind of the evolution of analytics, and it moves from, basic to kind of automation to predictive. And I think we're focused on that middle bubble now, which is a lot more automation. But Dan, I know you have a lot of insights and interest in at some point moving into the predictive category, which is kind of your heart and passion. So,
yeah, that's true. I mean, people, there's kind of there's a kind of arc that every organization is going to have to go on. First is just descriptive, second is diagnostic, and third is predictive. And the kind of descriptive level is just to describe what has happened. And that's just about having basic measurement of what's going on in your organization, whether how much are we spending on matters, or what strategies were employed by a litigator, or what's happening in our transactional arm. The sort of diagnostic is, you observe some phenomenon, you observe, hey, we're spending quite a lot on this particular class of transactions, or they seem to be taking a long time. And that's diagnostic, is just, well, so why has that happened? Predictive is what everybody really wants, which is, can I predict what my needs, what are my needs going to be in terms of litigation expenditure 2 quarters from now, based on where we are on some matters today. Everybody wants to be a predictive. The problem is a lot of organizations are barely doing descriptive well at this point. So it's a journey for them to get there. And the key, I think, for every organization is and this is what we help people with. If you're in a company or what have you, you have to create a sort of return on investment for the company, say for a corporate legal department, that can get them to predictive when they're working still largely in the descriptive space. And so being able to kind of create wins where they can go back to their organization and show them either where they saved money, or where they were more efficient, or did a better job along some set of measurements we might provide, but really trying to make the organization more mature, moving to become a predictive organization. That's what everybody wants to do, but there's, actually walking them up those steps is it's doable, but it's definitely non-trivial. That's for sure.
Well, and you need to get them to get the data to do that in the first place.
That's right. And so they need to, so part of it is to have, sometimes they have it in principle, but then it needs to be structured somehow. And so again, some of our capabilities are about coming into organizations who have either unstructured or semi-structured data and cleaning that stuff up so they can, do the sorts of things they would like to do ultimately. The valley you have to get across is they have to finance their path from here to there by being able to show that they're giving a return to the company along the way. You can't come and say, 3 to 5 years from now, you're going to be really cool, but in the meantime, it's just going to cost you a bunch of money. That really doesn't fly in most organizations. So yeah, there has to be a kind of thoughtful and purposeful approach about how to walk people kind of step by step on a plan to get to mature their organizations from a data perspective. That's been our journey. I know Elevate's been on a similar path with with the customers they've had. That's what everybody wants to do, and we're here to help them get there.
Dan, what does this mean for you and your co-founder Michael Bonrito, sort of personally? I mean, you hanging around, you staying with LexPredict? What changes for you?
We're gonna stay. We're gonna stay, and we're gonna continue to work in the entity, and in a lot of ways, when you're a smaller entity, you're playing every instrument in the band. And so one of the nice things here is that, Elevate's got a lot of other great pieces that we get to take the benefit of, and kind of per unit of time, we can actually work on what I think are on our highest and best purpose, rather than when you're a smaller entity, you have to kind of do a bunch of things that are necessary when you're running a smaller company. So I'm actually, this is one of the attractive properties, and I think we can actually leverage we can get the best out of our time under this framework than kind of on a pure go it alone basis. But we were very satisfied, very happy with the terms and the kind of the plan to go forward here. So and I'll continue to be a professor where I am today, and I don't work full time or anything like near that in at Elevate, but or even at LexPredict, but I will continue to play an important role, and so will Mike and others on our team.
Good. Pratik, we're just about out of time, but what about any final words, any final thoughts on this acquisition or on the future?
No, this for us is just such an integral piece to the puzzle. The LexPredict piece of the business falls now within the innovation arm of Elevate. We thought that was a kind of an ideal and relevant place for this piece of the puzzle to fall. Dan, myself, Mike, Eric, Kelly, the team. We're all going to be focused on really materializing something we call, E equals ME squared. And for us, that means Elevate equals machines and expertise in everything, right? And so our day job, Dan says he left a few jobs on the table, which is great. And I think it frees up some time for us to now focus on, how to actually materialize that innovation across Elevate. But also, primarily we're doing this for the law departments and law firms that we work with. So, we're just really excited. And, hopefully in 6 months' time, there's more stuff to come and new toys for us to play with. And we'd love to keep you guys posted.
Sounds good. Dan, any final words?
No, we're very excited to go forward and to bring, more exciting, as Pratik said, more exciting toys and fun things to the market. And so I just say, stay tuned for more.
We will do that. Well, a huge thanks to both of you for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Oh, we do too. We appreciate it. We appreciate you having us.
Cue exit music now.
Cue exit music now, yeah.
Play us out.
Thanks again to Pratik Patel, co-founder and vice president of innovation at Elevate, and Dan Katz, co-founder and chief strategy officer at LexPredict, for taking the time to be with me today on this show. Thanks again to Bob Ambrogi, my producer, for making this show happen. And thanks to all of you for listening. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a positive comment. Until next time, this is Bob Ambrogi. Thanks for listening.